Professor Sarah Chen stood at the window of her office in the Quantum Sciences building of Galactic University, watching the morning's triple sunrise paint the sky in stunning shades of purple and gold. Even after 5 years teaching here on New Cambridge, the sight still took her breath away. The crystalline spires of the campus buildings caught the light, sending rainbow refractions dancing across the grounds, where students of a dozen different species were already beginning their daily routines. She checked her appearance in the window's reflection, straightening her formal academic robes. At 35, she was one of the youngest full professors in the quantum mechanics department, and she felt the need to maintain a professional image. Her straight black hair was neatly pulled back, her dark eyes alert despite the early hour. The gentle hum of the building's gravitic stabilizers reminded her that another academic year was about to begin. The door chimed softly. "Enter," she called, turning to face her first appointment of the day. The being that glided into her office was unmistakably Proximan, tall and graceful, with iridescent scales in place of skin and 4 arms that moved with fluid precision. The student's large, multifaceted eyes reflected the morning light in a kaleidoscope of colors. "Professor Chen." The voice was melodious, using the standard translation implant that all non-human students were required to wear. "I am Kux. I was assigned as your research assistant for this term." Sarah smiled, gesturing to the specially designed chair that could accommodate various alien physiologies. "Welcome to Galactic University, Kux. Your academic records from the Proxima Institute are quite impressive." Kax's scales rippled in what Sarah had learned was a sign of modest embarrassment. "Thank you, Professor. Though I must admit, I am concerned about adapting to Earth methods of quantum calculation. Our approach on Proxima is quite different." "Different doesn't necessarily mean incompatible," Sarah replied, pulling up Kax's file on her holoscreen. "In fact, some of our greatest breakthroughs have come from combining various species' perspectives on quantum mechanics." The morning light caught Kax's scales again, and Sarah noticed a pattern she hadn't seen before, subtle markings that indicated this was a young female of her species, barely into adulthood by Proximan standards. The revelation made Kax's academic achievements even more impressive. "Your first assignment," Sarah continued, "will be assisting me with the introductory quantum mechanics course. We have a particularly diverse group this year: humans, Centaurians, even a few Rigelians." Kax's lower set of hands twisted together nervously. "Professor, in my studies at the Proxima Institute, we relied heavily on quantum intuition rather than mathematical formalism. I fear I may struggle with your Earth methods." Sarah leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Kux, do you know why I specifically requested a Proximan assistant?" When Kux indicated confusion with a ripple of scales, Sarah continued, "Because your species' intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics is fascinating to me. You perceive quantum relationships in ways humans can only theorize about. I believe we have much to learn from each other." The door chimed again, and Sarah glanced at the time. Her first class would begin soon. "We'll continue this discussion later. For now, would you like to observe my lecture? It might help you understand how we approach the subject here." Kax's scales shifted to a brighter hue. Excitement, Sarah guessed. "I would be honored, Professor." As they walked together through the corridors of the Quantum Sciences building, Sarah couldn't help but notice the curious glances from other students and faculty. While Galactic University prided itself on its diversity, Proximans were still relatively rare, especially in the physics department. Their intuitive approach to quantum mechanics often clashed with the rigid mathematical frameworks preferred by Earth-based institutions. The lecture hall was already filling up when they arrived. Sarah took her place at the podium, while Kux found a seat in the front row. The room was a marvel of adaptive architecture, with seats that automatically adjusted to each species' physical requirements and atmospheric bubbles for those who needed different breathing environments. "Welcome to Advanced Quantum Mechanics," Sarah began, activating the holographic display. "I'm Professor Chen, and this semester we'll be exploring the foundations of quantum theory from multiple perspectives. both traditional Earth methods and alternative approaches from other cultures. She noticed several students straightening up at this last part, their interest piqued. A Centaurian's antenna twitched in what might have been surprise or curiosity. To begin, let's consider a simple quantum system, a particle in a box. The hologram sprang to life, showing a three-dimensional representation of the quantum well. Now, you can tell me the traditional approach to solving for the wave function. Several hands went up, including a human student in the third row. But it was Kirk's reaction that caught Sarah's attention. The Proxyman was staring at the hologram with an intensity that suggested she was seeing something the others couldn't, perhaps perceiving the quantum relationships directly in ways Sarah could only imagine. As the lecture progressed, Sarah found herself repeatedly drawn to Kirk's reactions. The Proxyman's scales would shift colors in response to different concepts, and her four hands would occasionally move in complex patterns that seemed to trace invisible quantum fields. When the class ended, Kirk's remained in her seat while the other students filed out. Sarah approached her, noting the troubled ripple in her scales. "What's wrong, Kirk's?" was something unclear. "Professor Chen, I saw the solution differently, in ways I'm not sure I can explain using your mathematical notation." Sarah smiled. "Then we'll have to find a way to bridge that gap, won't we? That's exactly the kind of challenge I was hoping for when I requested a Proxyman assistant." As they left the lecture hall together, Sarah felt a surge of excitement. This semester was going to be different. With Kirk's help, she might finally begin to understand the intuitive quantum perception that made Proxymans so unique, and in the process, perhaps revolutionize how quantum mechanics was taught at Galactic University. The triple suns had risen fully now, their light streaming through the vast windows and creating prismatic patterns across the floor. Sarah watched as Kirk's scales reflected the light in ways that seemed to hint at deeper patterns, quantum relationships that human eyes couldn't see. Yes, this was going to be a very interesting semester indeed. The quantum mechanics lab hummed with energy as students from across the galaxy worked at their stations, each surrounded by the shimmer of holographic equations. Professor Sarah Chen moved between the workstations, observing their progress, but her attention kept returning to Kirk's station in the corner. The Proxyman sat perfectly still, all four hands hovering over her quantum interface. Her scales rippled with deep blues and purples. Colors Sarah had learned indicated intense concentration. The holographic display before her showed a complex quantum system, but instead of the standard mathematical approach, Kirk's was manipulating the quantum fields directly through the interface, her movements almost like a dance. "Fascinating," Sarah murmured, approaching Kirk's station. "You're solving the many-body problem, but I've never seen this method before." Kirk's scales flickered with uncertainty. "This is how we approach such problems on Proxima, Professor. We feel the quantum relationships, manipulate them directly. I can translate the results into your mathematical notation, but the process itself is different." A human student at the next station scoffed audibly. "That's not real physics," he muttered. "You can't just feel quantum mechanics." Sarah turned to address the student, her voice firm but calm. "Mr. Parker, different species perceive and interact with quantum phenomena in different ways. The mathematics we use are just one way of describing universal truths." But she could see the doubt in many students' eyes. Even in this age of interstellar cooperation, there was still resistance to approaches that challenged traditional Earth methods. Kirk's scales had shifted to a muted gray, embarrassment, or perhaps resignation. Later that afternoon in Sarah's office, Kirk struggled to explain her solution methods using standard notation. Her frustration was evident in the agitated movement of her scales. "Professor, I know the answers are correct, but expressing them in your mathematical framework feels like trying to describe color to a species that can only see in grayscale." Sarah leaned back in her chair, considering. "Then perhaps we need to develop a new framework, something that bridges the gap between Proxyman intuition and Earth mathematics." Kirk's scales brightened with interest. "Is that possible?" Why not? The universe doesn't care about our notation systems. If your species has developed a different but equally valid way of understanding quantum mechanics, we should be trying to learn from it, not dismiss it. They spent the next several hours working together, with Kirks demonstrating her intuitive problem-solving methods, while Sarah helped translate the results into terms that other species could understand. As they worked, Sarah found herself fascinated by the way Kirks's scales seemed to respond to quantum fluctuations that human instruments could barely detect. Your species evolved in a region of space with unusual quantum properties, didn't they? Sarah asked during a break. Kirks's scales rippled in affirmation. Yes, the quantum fields near Proxima Centauri are more active than here. Our ancestors developed the ability to perceive and navigate these fields. It's as natural to us as sight or hearing. That's remarkable, Sarah said, making notes on her tablet. And it might explain why your methods are so different from ours. We developed our understanding of quantum mechanics through mathematical abstraction because we couldn't perceive these phenomena directly. Their breakthrough came unexpectedly while they were examining a particularly complex quantum system. Kirks was manipulating the quantum fields in her intuitive way when Sarah noticed a pattern in her movements that corresponded to a mathematical sequence she recognized. "Kirks, do that again," she exclaimed, quickly pulling up a holographic representation of the mathematics. As Kirks repeated the manipulation, Sarah overlaid the mathematical notation on the hologram. The correspondence was perfect. "Do you see?" Sarah asked excitedly. "Your intuitive movements map directly onto our mathematical operators. They're just different representations of the same underlying reality." Kirks's scales blazed with brilliant colors. "Yes, and look, this sequence here." She moved her hands in a complex pattern, and new mathematical equations materialized in the hologram. It's like a translation key between our two approaches. They worked late into the evening, developing a hybrid system that combined Proximan intuition with Earth mathematics. When they finally emerged from the office, the triple suns had set, and the campus was quiet except for the soft hum of the gravitic stabilizers. "Tomorrow," Sarah said, "we'll present this to the department. It could revolutionize how we teach quantum mechanics." But as they parted ways, Sarah noticed a figure watching them from the shadows of the quantum lab. Dr. Marcus Wells, the department head, known for his conservative views on educational methods. His expression was unreadable in the dim light, but Sarah felt a sudden chill. Their innovative approach would face resistance, she knew. The question was, how much? Kirks must have sensed her concern. "Professor Chen, is something wrong?" Sarah forced a smile. "No, nothing's wrong. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be an important day." As she watched Kirks glide away, her scales still glowing with excitement, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to face challenges far more complex than any quantum system. But she was determined to see this through. The potential benefits of combining human and Proximan approaches were too great to ignore, no matter what opposition they might face. The department meeting room was silent except for the soft whir of atmospheric regulators as Professor Sarah Chen and Kirks finished their presentation. The holographic display still shimmered with their hybrid quantum notation system, a beautiful fusion of Earth mathematics and Proximan intuitive methods. Dr. Marcus Wells leaned forward in his chair, his gray eyes cold. "While this is interesting, Professor Chen, I fail to see how it advances our understanding of quantum mechanics. We already have perfectly adequate mathematical tools." "With respect, Dr. Wells," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady, "this isn't just about tools. Kirks has discovered quantum relationships that our traditional methods missed entirely. Look at these correlation patterns in the many-body system." Kirks stepped forward, her scales shifting through scholarly shades of deep blue and green. Using all four hands, she manipulated the holographic display, revealing complex quantum interactions that made several faculty members lean forward in spite of themselves. "These relationships were always present," Kirks explained, her translator conveying the excitement in her voice. "But your mathematical frameworks weren't designed to detect them. By combining our approaches. By abandoning rigorous mathematics for alien intuition, you mean? Interrupted Professor Harrison, one of Wells' longtime allies. This is a scientific institution, not a feel-good cultural exchange program. Sarah felt her temper flare, but before she could respond, an unexpected voice joined the discussion. Professor Liang, an elderly quantum theorist respected throughout the galaxy, spoke up from the back of the room. "I've seen something like this before," she said quietly, causing everyone to turn. 30 years ago, when I was working with the Rigelians, they perceived quantum entanglement differently than we did. Everyone dismissed their methods too, until they helped us develop quantum transportation. Wells shifted uncomfortably. That was different. Was it? Professor Liang stood, approaching the holographic display. "Kirks, would you show me that last sequence again?" As Kirks demonstrated the quantum manipulation, Professor Liang's eyes widened. "Extraordinary. You're not just seeing the quantum fields, you're perceiving their higher dimensional interactions. This could revolutionize our understanding of quantum gravity." The room erupted in murmured discussions. Sarah caught Kirks's eye, noting how her scales now rippled with cautious optimism. They had an ally, and an influential one. Later that evening, as they worked in the quantum lab, Kirks was still buzzing with energy, her scales flickering with excited patterns. "Professor Chen, I've been thinking about what Professor Liang said about higher dimensions. What if we could develop a teaching method that helps other species perceive quantum relationships the way my people do?" Sarah looked up from her calculations, intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" Kirks moved to the quantum interface, her 4 hands dancing through the holographic fields. "We already know that mathematics is a universal language. But what if we could create a new kind of mathematical language, one that bridges the gap between intuition and formalism?" She demonstrated, combining traditional notation with proximal movements in a way that made the quantum relationships visually obvious. Even Sarah, with her limited human perception, could begin to see patterns she'd never noticed before. "This is brilliant, Kirks," Sarah breathed. "We could create a whole new framework for quantum education." But their excitement was interrupted by the lab door sliding open. Dr. Wells stood there, his expression stern. "Professor Chen, a word." His eyes flickered to Kirks. "In private." In Wells' office, the criticism was immediate and harsh. "You're undermining centuries of established scientific methodology. This hybrid approach of yours is making a mockery of our department." "We're expanding our understanding, not undermining it," Sarah countered. "Kirk's insights are valid." "Kirks is a student," Wells cut in. "A very intelligent one, certainly, but still a student. And you're letting her radical ideas influence your judgment." Sarah stood her ground. "Her radical ideas are producing results that our traditional methods couldn't achieve. Isn't that what science is about? Finding new ways to understand the universe?" Wells' expression hardened. "The university board is meeting next week to review department funding. I strongly suggest you reconsider this line of research before then, for your own sake and Kirks's." The threat was clear, but as Sarah left his office, her resolve only strengthened. She found Kirks waiting in the lab, scales muted with concern. "He wants us to stop, doesn't he?" Kirks asked softly. Sarah nodded, then smiled. "Which means we must be onto something important. Get some rest tonight, Kirks. Tomorrow, we're going to push this further than ever." As she watched Kirks leave, Sarah began formulating a plan. They would need more than just Professor Liang's support to overcome the department's resistance. They needed irrefutable proof that their hybrid approach could solve problems that traditional methods couldn't. She turned back to the quantum interface, studying the patterns Kirks had revealed. There was something there, something profound about the nature of quantum reality itself, if it could just find the right way to demonstrate it. The lab's ambient lighting shifted to evening mode, casting a soft glow over the equipment. Sarah barely noticed the hours slipping by as she worked, driven by the conviction that they stood on the brink of something revolutionary. They just have to prove it before Wells and his allies could shut them down. In the darkness outside her window, the 3 moons of New Cambridge cast overlapping shadows on the campus grounds. Somewhere in those shifting patterns of light and dark, Sarah felt sure, lay the key to bridging the gap between human mathematics and alien intuition, and perhaps to understanding the quantum universe in ways neither species could achieve alone. The Galactic University's main conference hall buzzed with anticipation. Representatives from dozens of species filled the tiered seating, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of interstellar academia. Professor Sarah Chen stood at the podium, trying to calm her nerves as she watched Kirk's make final adjustments to their quantum interface display. This was their moment of truth. After weeks of intense work, they had finally achieved something unprecedented, a breakthrough that could change how the entire galaxy understood quantum mechanics. But with Dr. Wells and his supporters watching from the front row, Sarah knew they had only one chance to prove their case. Distinguished colleagues, she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. For centuries we've approached quantum mechanics through the lens of mathematical abstraction. Today, Cox and I will demonstrate a new paradigm, one that combines human analytical methods with proximate quantum perception. Cox stepped forward, her scales shimmering with professional confidence. The quantum interface hummed to life, projecting a complex, multi-dimensional display that filled the air above the stage. What you're about to see, Cox explained, is not just a visualization of quantum fields. It's a direct translation of how my species perceives quantum reality, mapped onto mathematical frameworks that all species can understand. She began to move her 4 hands in intricate patterns, and the display transformed. Quantum relationships that had previously been hidden became suddenly, startlingly clear. Even Dr. Wells leaned forward, his skepticism momentarily forgotten as he watched previously invisible patterns emerge. These patterns, Sarah continued, highlighting specific sequences, represent quantum interactions that our traditional mathematics predicted but could never fully describe. By combining proximate perception with human analytical methods, we can now not only see these interactions, but manipulate them in ways that were previously impossible. A Rigelian physicist in the 3rd row raised a tentacle. Are you suggesting that your hybrid system could lead to practical applications? Sarah smiled. More than suggesting. Kirk's, would you show them the gravity simulation? Kirk's scales flickered with excitement as she adjusted the interface. The holographic display shifted, now showing a complex model of quantum gravitational fields. As she manipulated the quantum relationships with her unique combination of intuition and mathematics, the audience gasped. The model was resolving quantum gravity paradoxes that had puzzled physicists for generations. Impossible, Dr. Wells muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Professor Liang stood up, her eyes shining. Not impossible, Marcus. Revolutionary. They've done it. They found a way to bridge the gap between quantum mechanics and gravity. The hall erupted in discussion, different species chattering in various languages as they processed the implications. Sarah felt a surge of triumph, but she knew they weren't finished yet. But the applications go beyond theoretical physics, she continued, raising her voice above the noise. Kirk's showed them the educational interface. The display changed again, now showing a simplified version of their system designed for teaching. This adaptive interface, Kirk's explained, helps students from any species begin to understand quantum relationships in both intuitive and mathematical ways. We've been testing it with a small group of volunteers. A young Centaurian student stood up, their antennae quivering with enthusiasm. It's true. I've been part of the test group. For the first time, I can actually see how the mathematics connects to real quantum behavior. My comprehension scores have improved by 200%. More students began standing, sharing similar experiences. Sarah watched Dr. Wells' face carefully, seeing his opposition crumbling in the face of undeniable results. But it was Professor Liang who delivered the final blow. The Galactic Science Foundation has reviewed preliminary data from this project, she announced, standing to address the crowd. They've approved full funding for a new quantum perception research center to be established here at Galactic University. The announcement hit like a shockwave. Dr. Wells' face went pale as he realized the political implications. This level of foundation support would make it impossible for him to suppress the project. After the presentation, as the excited crowd began to disperse, Cox approached Sarah privately. Her scales were shifting through colors Sarah had never seen before, joy mixed with something deeper. "Professor Chen," she said softly, "there's something I haven't told you. On my world, there's an ancient prediction about a time when our species would help others see the quantum dance of reality. We call it the awakening. I never thought." Sarah smiled, understanding the weight of the moment. Sometimes the most significant breakthroughs come not from one species alone, but from learning to see through each other's eyes. As they walked together through the campus that evening, the triple moons casting their light through the quantum fields that Cox could see so clearly, Sarah reflected on their journey. They had done more than just advance quantum physics. They had proven that the greatest discoveries come when different species work together, combining their unique perspectives to understand the universe in new ways. The quantum interface in their lab continued to glow, its patterns now visible to students of all species who were learning to bridge the gap between intuition and mathematics, between the seen and the unseen. And in those patterns, Sarah could see the future of science itself, a future where the boundaries between species dissolved in the face of shared discovery and understanding. The success of their presentation had brought unexpected challenges. The Quantum Perception Research Center was flooded with applications from students and researchers across the galaxy, all eager to learn the new hybrid approach. Professor Sarah Chen found herself working longer hours than ever, while Cox had become something of a celebrity in the quantum physics community. "Another interview request," Sarah said, scanning a holoscreen one morning. "This time from the Galactic Science Journal. They're calling your quantum perception techniques the biggest breakthrough since the unification theory." Cox's scales rippled with modest embarrassment. She was setting up a new quantum interface, her 4 hands moving with practiced precision. "I'm more interested in perfecting the educational applications, Professor. The basic interface is working well, but advanced concepts are still challenging to convey to non-Proximan students." Sarah nodded, understanding the concern. While the hybrid system had proven remarkably effective for teaching fundamental quantum mechanics, the more complex aspects of Proximan quantum perception remained difficult to translate. Their work was interrupted by an urgent message from Professor Liang. "Sarah, Cox, you need to see this immediately." The elderly physicist's hologram appeared in their lab, her expression grave. "The Regelian Science Academy is claiming priority. They say they developed a similar quantum perception system decades ago." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "But that's impossible. Their system was completely different." "Politics," Professor Liang said grimly. "They're worried about losing their position as the galaxy's leading experts in quantum transportation. They're demanding access to all your research data." Cox's scales had shifted to deep purples, colors of concern and determination. "Professor Chen, there's something we could try. A demonstration that would prove the uniqueness of our approach." "What do you have in mind?" Cox moved to the quantum interface, her scales now pulsing with intense concentration. The Regelian system focused only on quantum transportation, but our hybrid approach can do something they never achieved: direct manipulation of quantum gravity fields. Sarah's eyes widened as she understood. "You want to demonstrate quantum gravity control? Cox, that's incredibly dangerous. One mistake could create a localized gravitational anomaly." "I know the risks," Cox said softly, "but I also know we can do it. The patterns are there. I can see them clearly now, and with a hybrid system, I can show others how to see them too." Professor Liang's hologram flickered. The implications would be enormous. If he could demonstrate practical control of quantum gravity, it would revolutionize everything from space travel to energy production, Sarah finished. But the university board will never approve such a risky experiment. Kax's scales shifted to a determined gold. Then perhaps we need to show them something smaller first, a proof of concept. Over the next few weeks, they worked tirelessly to develop a scaled-down demonstration. Kax's unique perception abilities, combined with Sarah's mathematical precision, allowed them to map quantum gravitational fields with unprecedented accuracy. But as they worked, Sarah noticed something concerning. Kax was pushing herself too hard, her scales increasingly showing signs of stress, colors that flickered and faded instead of maintaining their usual vibrant patterns. "You need to rest," Sarah insisted one evening, after finding Kax still in the lab past midnight. "You're straining your perception abilities." "I'm fine," Kax insisted, though her scales told a different story. "We're so close to a breakthrough. Look at these patterns." She manipulated the quantum interface, revealing intricate gravitational relationships that even Sarah, with her limited human perception, could now begin to understand. The beauty of it took her breath away, but she couldn't ignore the trembling in Kax's hands. "Enough," Sarah said firmly. "We're not going to risk your health. The demonstration can wait." But before Kax could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the building. The quantum interface was showing dangerous fluctuations in the local gravitational field. "Something's wrong," Kax whispered, her scales bleaching to pale terror. "The quantum fields, they're destabilizing." Sarah rushed to the control panel, her fingers flying over the controls. "The containment field is failing. Kax, can you see what's happening?" Kax moved to the interface, all four hands dancing through the quantum fields. Her scales shifted rapidly through patterns Sarah had never seen before. She was perceiving quantum relationships at a level far beyond their previous work. "The gravitational harmonics are cascading," Kax explained, her voice strained. "If we don't stabilize them—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. A gravitational collapse could tear apart half the campus. Security teams were evacuating the building, but Sarah and Kax stayed at their posts, working desperately to contain the quantum cascade. Through their hybrid interface, Sarah could see what Kax was attempting: a complex manipulation of quantum fields that might stabilize the gravitational fluctuations. "I need your help," Kax gasped, her scales now pulsing with emergency patterns. "The mathematics, I can see the patterns, but I need your understanding to control them." Sarah stepped up to the interface, standing shoulder to shoulder with her student. Together, they began a desperate dance of quantum manipulation, Kax's intuitive perception guiding Sarah's mathematical precision, human and alien working in perfect harmony to prevent disaster. The lab hummed with energy as they worked, the very fabric of Spacetone twisting around them. Through their hybrid system, Sarah could almost see what Kax saw: the beautiful, terrifying dance of quantum gravity, now threatening to spiral out of control. But could they contain it in time? The quantum lab had become the eye of a gravitational storm. Equipment floated eerily in localized zones of zero gravity, while other areas experienced crushing forces that made the reinforced floor groan. Through it all, Professor Sarah Chen and Kax worked in desperate synchronization at the quantum interface. Their combined human proximan approached that only hope of preventing catastrophe. "The gravitational harmonics are still increasing," Kax reported, her scales flickering between emergency patterns. "But I think I see a way. Professor, can you help me map these quantum relationships?" Sarah's fingers flew across the mathematical controls, while Kax's four hands danced through the quantum fields. Through their hybrid interface, Sarah could now partially perceive what Kax saw naturally: the intricate web of quantum gravitational relationships that bound reality together. "There," Sarah exclaimed, highlighting a complex pattern in their display. "That's the resonance cascade that's causing the instability. If we can dampen those oscillations—" "I see it too," Kax confirmed, her scales pulsing with intense concentration. "But we'll need to modify the containment field's quantum signature. The mathematics are incredibly complex." Then let's solve it together, Sarah said firmly. Your perception, my calculations. As they worked, Sarah became aware of a crowd gathering outside the lab's reinforced windows. Dr. Wells was there, his face pale as he watched them attempt the impossible. Professor Liang stood beside him, her hands pressed against the glass in concern. But Sarah couldn't spare them any attention. The next few moments would either validate their entire approach to quantum physics or end in disaster. Kirk's scales suddenly blazed with brilliant recognition. Professor, the gravitational fluctuations, they're not random. They're following a higher dimensional pattern, like the one we discovered in our research. If we can match that pattern. Sarah saw it too, thanks to their months of working together. The mathematics aligned perfectly with Kirk's intuitive understanding, revealing a solution that neither of them could have seen alone. Ready? Sarah asked, her hands poised over the controls. Kirk's scales rippled with determination. Ready. Together, they began a precisely choreographed sequence of quantum manipulations. Kirk's perception guided them through the invisible fields of force, while Sarah's calculations kept their adjustments exactly on target. The hybrid interface hummed with power as they worked, displaying patterns of such complexity that even the watching physicists gasped in amazement. Slowly, gradually, the gravitational distortions began to stabilize. Equipment settled back to the floor as normal gravity reasserted itself. The warning alarms faded to silence. But they weren't finished yet. We can do more than just contain it, Kirk said excitedly, her scales now showing patterns of discovery. Professor, look at these quantum relationships. We're not just seeing gravity. We're seeing how it emerges from quantum fields. We can prove the quantum gravity connection. Sarah understood immediately. This crisis had given them an unprecedented opportunity to demonstrate their theories. Through their hybrid interface, they could actually show other scientists how quantum mechanics and gravity were intimately connected. Do it, Sarah nodded, smiling at her brilliant student. Show them what we've learned. Kirk's manipulated the quantum fields with all four hands, while Sarah provided mathematical guidance through their interface. The holographic display transformed, showing the fundamental relationship between quantum mechanics and gravity in a way that any physicist could understand. It was beautiful, elegant, and undeniable. The watching crowd had grown larger. Sarah could see tears in Professor Liang's eyes as she witnessed decades of theoretical work finally proven. Even Dr. Wells stood speechless, his previous skepticism forgotten in the face of unprecedented discovery. As the last quantum fluctuations settled into harmony, Kirk's scales shifted to colors of profound satisfaction. We did it, Professor. Not just the containment. We've shown everyone that our hybrid approach works, that we can understand the quantum universe better by working together. Sarah placed a hand on Kirk's shoulder, feeling the smooth scales beneath her palm. We've done more than that, Kirk's. We've proven that the greatest discoveries come when different species combine their unique perspectives, when we learn to see through each other's eyes. The lab door opened as the safety systems finally allowed entry. Professor Liang was the first through, followed by a crowd of excited physicists all talking at once. The Galactic Science Foundation representatives were demanding immediate publication rights. Dr. Wells was already discussing emergency funding for expanded research. But Sarah's attention was on Kirk's, whose scales were showing colors she'd never seen before, joy mixed with something deeper, more profound. The awakening, Kirk said softly, referencing the ancient Proximum prediction. It's really happening. We're helping all species see the quantum dance of reality. Sarah smiled, watching as physicists of a dozen different species crowded around their hybrid interface, each beginning to understand quantum gravity in their own way. And this is just the beginning. Imagine what else we might discover together. Through the lab's windows, the triple suns of New Cambridge were setting, their light creating complex interference patterns in the quantum fields that Kirk could see so clearly. But now, thanks to their work, others were beginning to see those patterns too. The boundary between human mathematics and alien intuition was dissolving, revealing a deeper understanding of the universe they all shared.